Okay, first of all, thanks for being rock stars and staying until 12 o'clock or whatever time it is on the last day. I'm Nicole McCoyne. I'm the chair of emergency medicine at Ochsner Medical Center in New Orleans. This is Carmen Wolf. She's the residency program director at TriStar Skyline in Nashville, Tennessee. And does everybody have a sheet of paper? We were passing out sheets of paper. Fabulous. We're going to use those in a minute. So I'm going to tell a little story to this to begin with, so you understand why we're talking about it. But we're going to talk about this method called STARS. It goes by a few different acronyms. But to help you with your interviews or whenever you're trying to talk about yourself and your achievements in kind of a high stakes situation, because who here gets nervous and hates interviewing? Everyone. Okay. Pretty much sums it up. There's not many people who really love it. And so the idea is to kind of take all of these, it's like side effects to NyQuil, nausea, vomiting, just kidding, excessive thirst, flushing, and, all of us many of us kind of blank out when we're asked a question, kind of put on the spot. And so the idea behind this concept is to take all of that stress away. And so the reason why I really love this is from a personal experience. So 3 years ago, I was a vice chair, and I was getting ready to interview at multiple places for a chair role. It was very intimidating. And the first round is it was the beginning of COVID, of course. And the first round was like a Brady Bunch of firing squad, right? Like a search committee with 12 questions, zooming at you. And so it was really, really anxiety provoking. Well, I had gone to a academic leadership fellowship and a bunch of courses on leadership, and I had a professional coach, and all of them kept talking about this technique. And I didn't really understand it at first because I thought, well, how are you supposed to make up the answers to the questions before you get the questions? This makes no sense. But I tried it in this whole chair search process, and it worked phenomenally. So, and especially virtually, because you create your 8 or 10 or 6 stars, these stories, and you can just jot a 1-word reminder of these different stars down on a sheet of paper right by the screen, right by where you're zooming, and kind of glance down, and it reminds you of these answers that are applicable to a number of different questions. And so we're going to actually start working on them for you right now, and kind of help you formulate these so that when you are in the next scenario where you have to come up with these answers, you're going to feel so much more confident and prepared. So stars go by a bunch of different names: stars, soars, starries. It's all the same principle. You are telling a story. You're not just answering the question. You're taking the interviewer on a journey with you through a problem that you solved and how you got to the end, with some key points, like details that you add to really provide impact to your story.
All right, so I don't know about you guys, but when I come to a conference, I like to leave with tangible things, right? What am I gonna do, change, take away from this experience in Austin? So we are actually gonna do this along with you. And step 1, you're actually gonna use the back of your sheet of paper. This is just a brainstorming session. And what you're gonna do, you're going to reflect on, let's say, 6, 8, 10. This is brainstorming. Not all of these have to be amazing. Just start writing down ideas of things that you've accomplished, done, things that you are proud of, decisions that you've made that made a difference in your department or your residency group. Maybe there was some innovation, a problem that you needed to solve. So I want you to take 2 minutes right now and just jot down 6, 8, 10 things. This is just mind dump, what you can think of. If you're at home, it's easy to pull out your CV. That can sometimes jog your memory. But just write down these topics. I will give you 60 seconds of silence to do that. Now start looking through your list as you're finishing kind of making your brainstorming list. and pick just one or two that you'd like to use today. So of that big brainstorming list of 8, 10 things, let's choose one or two that you're going to use today. You can put stars beside them of the two that you're going to use, and just think of your stars are going to be stories. So you're going to take those two stories and you're going to turn the page over. Okay, so each of those examples is going to become a star, and then you'll eventually kind of use like a catchphrase to help you remember them. So, star. First is S, that's the situation. So how would you describe the situation that was in place? It helps to give the person who's interviewing you a context for what was going on. They don't know your department, they don't know your residency program, they don't know what was going on at that time. So really paint a picture of what was going on. Okay, T is for task. What was your actual task? What was the obstacle that you had to overcome? What were you specifically charged with doing? And really try to focus on how you contributed to whatever this outcome was. A is the action. What specific actions did you take in that case that made a difference? Okay, this may later demonstrate important principles about your integrity, or you're willing to be innovative, or your creativity. So you want to think through each of those specific actions. Next, what are the actual results that happened? Because of what you did, what was the outcome? And especially if you had, if you're at home and you have access to all of your information, do you have any data to back any of this up? Can you think of ways that you could display this data, charts, graphs, percentages, surveys, anything that showed that there was a difference as you moved forward? And then finally, a lot of these are going to be stars or staries because of this last letter would be what skills or traits did this story prove? And we'll talk about this at the end, how you take your star and then kind of assign it to a specific skill set. And that is what makes these stories ultimately interchangeable, because the stars that you choose are going to illustrate something that you have done, demonstrate your involvement in a project, but then can be relatable to multiple different areas. And remember, you're telling a story here. You're not just saying that you're innovative, saying that you're motivated, saying that you try hard, work hard. You're taking the interviewer with you on a journey, right? You have this hero's journey that you want to share with them. And so you need to take them through that story and help them feel what people were feeling in that moment and help them feel what you really did to make a difference. So we've given you, let's just do 2 minutes for you to take a minute to use one or two of your stories and try to kind of put them into the star form. All right, we're going to take a minute and just do a brief example of how a star works. So I'm going to be the interviewer. Dr. McCoyne is going to be the interviewee. And in this case, she is the medical director, and she is applying for the associate chief of staff position. So the first example will be, I'm going to ask her this question, and we'll see how she answers off the cuff, and then she's going to show you what it looks like to use a star. So Dr. McCoyne, can you tell me how you, in your role as medical director, have helped your chair in moving the department forward this past year?
Oh, well, Dr. Wolf, it's been a really great 5 years. I've been in the role for 5 years. I really do a lot of work as the medical director. I write a lot of protocols. I help a lot with the productivity of the department and the metrics that we report, and just make sure that everything is running smoothly in the department. I do a little bit with personnel issues, depending on what the chair needs. And then sometimes, I'll help with specific projects like looking at budget changes. I really feel like I kind of am the help-all, the right-hand person for the chair. It's really been a great 5 years of experience.
All right, so let's hear that using a specific star. So Dr. McCoy, can you tell me how, in your role as medical director, you helped your chair in moving the department forward?
Oh, well, it's been a really great 5 years. I've tried to use my role as medical director to do a few things. One is I really want to support our faculty and staff, obviously have us give good patient care, and really align the mission of the department with the mission of the institution. And so, I think a good example to elaborate on this would be in Q4 2 years ago, we had a horrible financial situation. Our hospital the system had lost $40 million in a quarter. And so all the chairs were tasked with basically finding wins in their budget, ways to cut kind of the extras. And so the chair came to me as kind of his help and asked if I could come up with some plans, if I could take a look at the budget. And, I didn't want to cut physician hours because morale was already kind of rough through COVID. I didn't want to take away our social gatherings because, like we all know, we needed some wellness and togetherness. And so I was really trying to search for some low-hanging fruit, and our services had really gone downhill because we had so much turnover. And so I figured out a way to kind of make this a win-win. The scribe services, they were only doing like HPIs and physical exams and review of systems for us. They weren't really even helping much with the MDMs. And so it would be a $250,000 win for us if we cut the scribes. And if we had increased our resident complement in the same year. So we thought, well, we'll put the residents out there in that front area where the scribes work, kind of the easier, lower acuity patients, and then take the scribes out of the picture to make this a budget win and be fiscally responsible. So we presented it to the faculty, and when we did, it was pretty well received actually, because they were really excited about the residents getting that education and being with them. The only concern was the scribes losing their jobs. And so then we took that and offered them tech positions in the ED if they were going to lose their position with the scribe company. So then they got a new skill set. We got some new techs. The residents got more bread and butter out front. And we got the residents help as faculty, and we saved $250,000 that year. So it was a pretty good win, but those are the kind of things, every day that we're trying to improve upon, and I've tried to improve upon in this role.
So Dr. McCoy's story about what she did, to address this financial crisis demonstrates her ability at communication, her empathy towards others, her ability to make a plan and follow through. So it demonstrates many, many things that you'd like to say about yourself. I'm a really good communicator. I really care about my faculty. I do a lot of things to support them. Well, now you're giving me examples so that I can really see what you've done and follow you through that journey. So what I want you to do is take a look at the stars that you've written, and I'm going to say some common interview questions. And when I say the interview question, if you could use one of your stars to answer it, I just want you to raise your hand. I promise I won't make you speak, okay? So the first interview question, tell me about an obstacle you faced and what you did to overcome it. Can anyone use their star to answer that? Perfect. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a colleague and how you handled it. Anybody? Can anyone use their star? Tell me about your communication style. Communication style. So have you raised your hand for more than one question? Absolutely. So that's the point, is that, no matter what question you get, when Dr. McCoy was interviewing, there's a list of 100 questions, right? And so if you can go through and assign your stars to each one of those questions, you can be confident, even with a pool of 100 questions, just 6 to 8 well-developed stars will actually let you answer up to 100 of these common questions. And so it's great to get those list of questions ahead of time, prepare your stars ahead of time, and you can even start assigning your stars. So that's kind of the last S on the stars would be what skills or tasks, and so you can put those into kind of common list.
Yeah, so if you take the example we used with the scribe, with the $250,000 worth of savings on scribes, these are all the different kind of big bullet points, big buckets that it hits, right? It's about aligning goals. I talked about how we needed to align the mission of the department with the mission of the institution. It's talking about fiscal responsibility, communication with the faculty, communication with the chair, communication with the scribes, Building consensus. We went to the group. We talked about it with the group. Demonstrating responsible use of resources. Innovation, thinking outside of the box, and maintaining morale and creating community. So these are some of the most commonly asked buckets of questions, and this one story can tackle all of these. And so super helpful, because you can imagine when you're asked that question, your mind just starts like reeling, like, wow, I have a really big job. What am I going to pick from in my 4 million experiences to tell this interviewer that I'm competent? And now you've got it ready to go. And if you look, so this is the Department of Labor puts out, there's all kinds of lists you can search like ahead of time to be prepared. But the Department of Labor puts out a list of transferable skills that go across careers. And they're basically the hot topics for all interview questions across disciplines. And so you can kind of go through this list and make sure, hey, one of my stories, one of my stars fits each of these big pieces, and really feel confident. So it's all about feeling confident, right? Then you don't have to think so much on your feet because you've already prepared and rehearsed these stars. And as you're applying for a job, like if you search, for example, when I was applying for the chair role, you can search commonly asked questions for chair interviews for medicine. And you can get 10, 12 hits with just lists from search firms of questions. And so once you create your answers, your stars, you can go and try to match them up and be prepared.
So your last step is to look at your stars that you've created and kind of assign the transferable skills. So you can either think of questions you'd be asked, like this is an obstacle, this is an example of teamwork, this is an example of communication, this is an example of fiscal responsibility. And so that would be that last category that you can kind of add down below each of them. And so those are kind of the tags that you would use. It's good to kind of pre-think of those in your mind. That way you're kind of not stumped when you get the questions, but it's great to assign that as the S in stars. And then the final thing is to think of a way to remember your stars. So coming up with some type of tagline or one-word reminder, right? This is my scribe story. This is my, conflict story, or something more specific about what that story entails. This is my story about the GI Bleed recess that I led. Whatever it was, make a name or a title for each of those. That way you can have them in your mind. So you kind of name your stars so that you can pick them out and then move them around as needed during your interview.
And interviewing virtually is like a total win, because before you had to come in and like literally think of these, have them ready in your Rolodex in your mind. But now you can literally just jot down those words right beside your computer, and it's like a little security blanket, right? If you get stuck, it's like going back to the ABCs. If you get stuck, you look down at your stars and you've got an answer.
So hopefully this is helpful for you guys as you prepare for your next interview, whether they're behavioral questions or just general questions. I think you'll be able to use this in a broad range of places. We'd be happy to take questions.
Anybody? Has anybody used these before or heard of them? You've heard of them? Okay. Fabulous.
Awesome. Yes?
I have a question. So does your strategy changes based on what time frame of say you're the first group of interviewee going to your interview, I'm assuming that interviewers are having more energy to listen to a longer story. When you go into a later time frame, they're probably exhausted. They've probably heard 15 stories. Do you change your strategy based on that?
You do. So you have to know going in, it's always really important to ask questions about how long is your interview, how long is allotted for your interview. Think about what time of day you're going in. I agree. And think about how many interviewers are going to be present. So you can actually ask more questions, maybe to the assistant who's creating the appointment, than you think you can. I mean, don't get too crazy, but you can ask things like, do you know how large this panel is? Do you know an estimate of how many questions they may ask if it's a super formal interview? And then that way you can think to yourself. So for example, for the first round of chair interviews, there may be 10 people on the screen, 12, depending on where you are, and you may have 50 minutes. So then you know before you go in there, if you've already asked and done your homework and said, okay, there's going to be 10 people, they're each going to ask a question. It's all scripted. So I need to make my answers about 5 minutes, about 4 minutes. You know, you may want to leave a little extra time at the end so that you can have some conversation. So then you can kind of rehearse your stars and you can expand them and contract them however you want. The key is don't leave out good data. So interviewers like percentage changes, dollar amounts. Like when you talk about a positive change you made, if you can, I mean, it's just like physicians, we love data, right? If you can put some data out there, it really packs a punch in your story. So just don't leave that piece out, but you can kind of contract and expand the details as long as you still engage them.
And I think you can pay attention to body language. That will tell you a lot about what the interviewer was expected, because you'll see kind of this like fidget when they're not really listening anymore. They've got a list of questions that they're required to go through for this chair search. So you really pay attention to how they're interactive. If they're enthralled in your story, that's great, go ahead. But when you see the interest starting to wane, wrap it up and move on. All right, anything else? Great, thank you so much for coming.
Super, thanks guys. Have safe travels home.